Steve McQueen was the king of cool, a Hollywood icon whose movies defined an era. But behind the fame, the fast cars, and the fearless image was a man burdened with pain that no spotlight could hide. His story was one of triumph and tragedy, marked by a troubled beginning, a stormy rise to stardom, and heartbreak that followed him to his last breath, and beyond, to the devastating loss of his daughter years later. Terrence Stephen McQueen was born on March 24, 1930, in Beech Grove, Indiana. His father, William McQueen, was a barnstorming stunt pilot who thrilled crowds with aerial tricks, but he wasn't around long enough to thrill his own son. Before Steve was even born, William abandoned the family, leaving his young mother, Julia, to raise a child she was not ready for. Julia was only 20, beautiful but broken, with a growing drinking problem and a weakness for violent men. Her instability would shape Steve's earliest years in painful ways he never forgot. When Julia realized she couldn't care for her son, she sent him to live with his grandparents in Slater, Missouri. For the first time, Steve found safety. Life on the farm gave him structure and peace, a feeling of belonging he had never known. He would later recall those quiet days among the cornfields as the happiest of his childhood. But happiness for Steve McQueen never lasted long. When Julia returned, she uprooted him once again, pulling him from the only stable life he'd known. Back in her care, chaos resumed. Her new husband was violent, often taking his anger out on Steve. School was no refuge either. Dyslexia and partial deafness made learning difficult, and humiliation came easily. The abuse and frustration built inside him until, at just 9 years old, he ran away, choosing the streets over his mother's home. Life as a runaway in Indianapolis hardened him fast. He fell in with a street gang, surviving by theft and grit. When Julia realized how far he'd fallen, she sent him back to Missouri to his grandparents. For a while, peace returned, but as before, it didn't last. By the time he was 12, Julia had remarried yet again and dragged Steve to Los Angeles. Her new husband was crueler than the last. The beatings resumed, and one night, after a particularly brutal attack, Steve was thrown down a staircase. Lying at the bottom, bloodied and shaking, he looked his stepfather in the eye and said, "You lay your stinking hands on me again, and I'll kill you." It wasn't a child's outburst, it was a vow. That moment marked the end of Steve's innocence and the beginning of his defiance. By 14, Steve had left home for good. He joined a traveling circus, taking odd jobs and chasing adventure. The circus didn't last long, but it proved something. He couldn't live under anyone's control. Back in Los Angeles, he drifted into petty crime. Police caught him stealing hubcaps, landing him once more in his mother's home, where his stepfather waited with his fists. It was another beating, another escape, and this time, the system stepped in. His mother signed papers declaring him incorrigible, sending him to the California Junior Boys Republic in Chino, a reform school for troubled youth. At first, it was a nightmare. The rules were harsh, the punishments worse, and as the new kid, Steve was an easy target. But over time, something shifted. For once, he began to adapt, learning discipline and leadership. By the time he left at 16, the angry, broken boy had turned into someone stronger. Years later, even at the height of fame, he would return to the Boys' Republic to speak to students, reminding them he had once stood exactly where they stood. After leaving the school, Steve wandered restlessly. He tried the Merchant Marines, the Carnival, even lumberjacking in Canada. He drifted from job to job, city to city, until finally, in 1947, he found himself drawn to the United States Marine Corps. Signing up at 17, he saw it as a chance for stability, or at least structure. The Marines didn't change him overnight. He was promoted to private first class, then demoted again and again for disobedience. Once, he went AWOL for 2 weeks with a girlfriend and spent 41 days in the brig for it. Yet even here, he found something to fight for. During one Arctic mission, several men were thrown into icy waters after a ship accident. Steve dove in without hesitation, saving 5 of them. The act revealed a side of him the world rarely saw, loyal, brave, and capable of sacrifice. When his service ended, he was still searching. The GI Bill led him to New York City, where he enrolled in acting classes at the neighborhood playhouse under Sanford Meisner. For the first time, he discovered purpose in something beyond survival. Acting gave him a focus he'd never had: discipline, creativity, and control. He worked tirelessly, taking odd jobs and racing motorcycles on weekends for extra money. The thrill of speed stayed with him for life. By 1955, he moved to Los Angeles, chasing bigger roles and bigger dreams. There, he met and married actress Neil Adams, the woman who would bear his 2 children and share his early climb to stardom. His breakthrough came with the low-budget sci-fi film The Blob, followed by the TV western Wanted, Dead or Alive. Suddenly, the troubled kid from Missouri was a household name. Then came The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and Bullet, the film that turned him into a legend. The car chase scenes became the stuff of Hollywood history, but the cost was high. Warner Brothers, furious over the film's budget, canceled his contract, until Bullet became a box office smash. When they came crawling back, McQueen turned them down. For once, the rebel had won on his own terms. But the success didn't heal his private wounds. His marriage to Neil fell apart after years of affairs and tension. A failed abortion in 1971 broke whatever was left between them. Then came Ali MacGraw, his co-star in The Getaway. Their affair made headlines, and both left their spouses to marry. Ali was often called the love of his life, but their relationship was volatile. Passion and jealousy consumed them. When she suffered a miscarriage, the pain shattered them both. They divorced in 1978. After Ali, McQueen pursued a quieter life, or at least tried to. He met Barbara Minty, a model he'd seen in a magazine ad, and made her his third wife. But even then, he couldn't escape his demons. Throughout his marriages, he'd been a serial womanizer. Affairs with Lauren Hutton, Barbara Lee, and others were open secrets in Hollywood. Despite his fame, he was restless, searching for something he couldn't name. In the mid-70s, he vanished from Hollywood. Instead of movie sets, he lived in a motorhome, traveling the country and racing motorcycles. Many thought he was simply chasing freedom, but those close to him knew better. He was running from fame, from addiction, from himself. He drank heavily, smoked constantly, and filled his life with parties and danger. Yet even then, he never forgot where he came from. His contracts with studios included demands for jeans, razors, and supplies, not for himself, but for the Boys' Republic, the reform school that once saved him. It was during this time that a persistent cough began to haunt him. He thought it was the years of cigarettes catching up, but it wasn't that simple. Tests revealed something far more terrifying: mesothelioma, a rare cancer caused by asbestos exposure. The diagnosis came as a blow to a man who had survived so much. Doctors told him it was incurable. McQueen refused to accept it. He traveled to Mexico for experimental treatments, desperate for a cure. Despite his wealth and willpower, nothing could save him. On November 7, 1980, Steve McQueen died at just 50 years old. But the pain didn't end with him. Decades later, tragedy struck again when his daughter, Terry Leslie McQueen, died unexpectedly at 38 from complications following a liver transplant. For those who had watched the McQueen family for generations, it was another heartbreaking chapter in a story filled with loss. Steve McQueen's life was a paradox, a man who played heroes but lived like an outlaw, who had everything the world could offer yet never escaped the shadows of his childhood. Behind every movie, every race, every cool smirk on screen, was a boy still running from the staircase, from the pain, from the father who left and the mother who couldn't love him right. And even after death, that legacy of brilliance and heartbreak followed his name, making the King of Cool a symbol not just of rebellion, but of resilience born from suffering.